and not the thing that anybody signs up for, not
Right.
that anybody wants. And I found my world got really, really small because I was in this space and energy of trying to navigate, trying to fix my kids, trying to help this, trying to do this,
Right.
and then juggling the opinions and judgments and criticisms of everyone else. So my world got really small. And that was a way selfishly to feel like it was safe, except it wasn't safe, because then we isolate ourselves. And then I remember having the day sitting here going, okay, I've like perfectly safely isolated myself from everyone, and I still have the problem. Oh crap, my way's not working. Like it was just this moment of not working.
Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man. He'll unpack wisdom and insights from a cross-section of top quality performers in business, media, sports, entertainment, and lifestyle to uncover key elements to help you live your best audacious life ever. So without further ado, here is the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations, folks. It's Audley Stevenson, and I'm back with another edition of the Audacious Living Podcast. Of course, this is the most audacious podcast you'll find on the internet. And I want to say thank you for being here and helping us continue our ongoing goal of helping our listeners live their best audacious lives ever. You can find us on social media, on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under the handle The Audacious Pod. And if you're watching on our YouTube channel, then you know all you've got to do is tap that bell down below, ding, 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 and that way you're connected to all good things Audacious related. Now, regular followers of the podcast will know that I'm a big fan when it comes to sharing our stories because of the encouragement, support, and guidance we can provide others simply by opening up a bit of our world. It has the ability to have a profound impact on the lives of others. And we'll never fully know in the moment the kind of difference we can make through our life experiences, which is all the more reason why I think we should share. As a life and adversity coach, Marsha Vanwynsberghe understands the power of the story very, very well. And she's here on this episode of the podcast to expand a bit further on the topic and provide greater insight into the stories we share with one another and why they're so powerful. You'll also hear her personal story, and I tell you, it is one that really makes you pay attention. And so, without any further ado, here's my conversation with Marsha Vanwynsberghe. Enjoy. Hey, Marsha, thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you spend some time here. So thank you. Thank you first off and foremost.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Audley. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yes, I am as well. It was neat to find out that we're neighbors here. You're here just in Kitchener or just in Waterloo down the road, which is nice. I'm here in Brampton more specifically. It's a snowy day, and so we both know what we're going through today. But it's nice to be indoors, and it's nice to have insightful, powerful conversations as well.
Yeah, my favorite thing to do on a winter day indoors. Why not?
Yes,
right?
That's right. Now, storytelling is your thing, and you very much. I mean, you're a coach, you're a podcaster, you're an author. You've got a bunch of things on your plate that keep you going. But your work is very much centered around the power of the story, and even us owning our own stories. And maybe as a starting point, I can get you to talk about sort of what got you to where you are now.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes, I do believe our stories are what connect us. And it is typically the thing that we are most afraid of others knowing about us is actually what connects us the most. And so I still am, but I was a parent about 10 years ago dealing with teen substance abuse that came out of nowhere. And not the thing that anybody signs up for, not that anybody wants. And I found my world got really, really small because I was in this space and energy of trying to navigate, trying to fix my kids, trying to help this, trying to do this, and then juggling the opinions and judgments and criticisms of everyone else. So my world got really small. And that was a way selfishly to feel like it was safe, except it wasn't safe because then we isolate ourselves. And then I
Right.
remember having the day sitting here going, okay, I've like perfectly safely isolated myself from everyone, and I still have the problem. Oh crap, my way's not working. Like it was just this moment of not
Right.
working.
Right.
So slowly, through a lot of work, a lot of support, a lot of counseling, I ended up starting to share my experience in small groups at schools, in small organizations, and it grew from there to small stages, etc., and books. And really, the synopsis is that I had to come to a space of learning how to own my own story, like my
Right.
part of the story, and learn how to share that and leave everyone in integrity, because that's the most important part, right? If we need to keep everyone in integrity if we're sharing parts of ourselves. And as I did that, I started to understand how powerful our stories were,
Wow.
because there was everywhere I spoke, I was inundated with people saying, that's my story. I haven't told a soul for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. And it was blowing my mind how many people were completely letting shame dictate their life.
Yeah.
And that gave me fuel, to be honest. It helped me to
Yes.
heal, and it gave me fuel that it's like, wait, this narrative isn't going to change unless we keep talking about it. And so through that process, I wrote a number of collaborative chapters, and then wrote my own book in 2017, and then started my podcast. And it was like, this is, I think what I'm here for is sharing difficult stories, learning how to do it, and helping others to be able to share their stories. So it's really everything that I do is about stories, but they're about the kind of stories that people don't like to talk about.
Mm. I sit
Mhm.
and I smile as you talk about the sharing stories and the power of that, because that is sort of one of the tenet principles of this podcast, and that
Yeah.
we all have our own story to share, and it's great that you have your story, but it's even more powerful when you can help someone else. And I saw an expression the other day that so one person's autobiography is someone else's survival guide, and so when you're going through and when you're authentically just putting your wares on display and being, open and honest, first with yourself, right? Because, before you can start talking about my story, I've got to be honest with myself about it. And, chances are there's going to be some messy parts about my story that I may not be happy with. I might, you talk about shame. I might be embarrassed, but I
Mhm.
still have to own it. And so when you can do that and then give it to someone else,
Mhm.
that's powerful. That's so powerful.
I love what you just said there. And it is powerful. The piece that you said, I think that really hits home is this space on, you can't share it with someone else until you can come to this space of owning all of your parts.
Yep.
And when I say that, like, I mean, I didn't share a lot of details about my story. You don't have to, because you
Right.
can imagine what that was like.
Yep.
And the details don't matter, because people think the details matter. They don't matter. But it's the piece that I had to own, that did I make mistakes in the process? 10,000% I did. I
Sure.
sure did. Like I sure did.
Well,
And
Marsha, when you're going through a traumatic or difficult, no one gives you
no
here's a
manual.
play-by-play what you do up front if this happens.
No.
This is on the job training we're doing, right?
Yeah, I think parenting period is on the job training. This was like parenting period. Like it was
Right.
it was in the moment. And you're right. That's exactly it. But I do openly say, like, there were things that I wish I could have done differently. And I could have gone back and changed all of those things, and we still could have had the same situation, because there were decisions that were outside of my control. And I think that's a really important part, because parents are so afraid of making mistakes. Like, first off, I love you, but you're going to make them. Like, it's going to happen.
Yeah, that's right.
And can we just normalize it? And I think there's power in, and I've had those conversations with my kids. Like, did I make mistakes? 100% I did. I guarantee I did. Did I do the best that I could with the information that I had at the time? Hands down, yes. And I think that's the difference, is being able to recognize that we did the best we could with what we had at the time.
I would not also add to that we also look at our intentions and what we were trying to accomplish, right? We wanted to, we want to grow our children to be responsible individuals and be contributors in society. And did we do that, right? My eldest daughter is 28, and I'll look at her and go, you know what? I did pretty good. Not perfect, but no one's perfect. but I did pretty good.
Yeah.
And so, and there's pride in that, right? There's pride in that. I oftentimes say that, if you can raise your children into adults that you like, then you've done a good job, right? So, and that's but again, there's no book that tells you how to do this thing. It's as you go, and I think we want to be careful for getting those step-by-step, play-by-play, because everyone is different. Every scenario is different. Every circumstance is different. Every emotion is different. And so we also want to be mindful that we're not just following a scripted list of the check. Oh, okay, we're here now, because it's different, right? So.
And yeah, your kids are different. You grow, you're different. All of these pieces are part of it. And it becomes a very challenging perspective that your kids might not turn out the way that you would have liked, or not do the things that you would like, and still learning to love them regardless, which is it's a hard time to do that, but loving them regardless, and knowing that I gave them all the tools that I could. Yep. What they do with those tools is entirely up to them. So it's a tricky thing, because I do think that when our kids are little, we have this little badge of honor that when they're behaving, it's like, oh, that's good parenting. And I'm not saying it isn't, because it is, but it's also, if a kid is misbehaving, the first thing we do is look at the parents. A lot of times it's like, do something with your kids, like as if it's 100%. And then as they get older, we don't share a brain. We don't. And they have to make decisions on their own. And so that means allowing them to learn. And I think that's a big thing, is letting them make mistakes and letting them learn.
Yeah, no, I agree. I want to talk about the parts of the story that we choose to share, because I think that's also important. And depending on the part you share could have entirely different outcomes. And so, for example, you can tell that piece of the story where you had a difficult moment, that challenge, and what it did, and the pain, all that kind of stuff. You can focus your part of the story on that aspect. The piece that I think is most valuable is talking about how you got past those things and how you were able to overcome. So again, you can focus on the upfront stuff all you want, and there's nothing wrong with sharing that aspect of it. But I believe, and perhaps your thoughts are, the true value comes in when you know how I got to the other side.
Oh, I actually couldn't agree more. And that's actually where people get stuck in the story, is like trying to figure out, how do I share all those parts? I'm like, they're not necessary. Like, you don't have to share those parts. What people want to know, like you, any of the listeners, you are perfectly designed to be you're perfectly designed to support the person that you used to be. And so when you're in this space, when you're in this space of looking at it going, okay, well, who do I help? What can I do? Well, the lessons that you learn are probably the ones that you were praying for years ago. And so there's always somebody else in your shoes who is in that space of wanting support. So when it comes to this, exactly what you're saying is, how did I get past that? How did I work through that? Yep. How did I create change? Not like how ugly, messy, and gory was it in the time. Right. You know what? We don't need that. We don't need that. That doesn't support anyone. But sharing how you got past something can be very powerful. And the problem is that most of us deem those steps as, well, they're simple. Like, I don't understand. We undermine the value that we have because we think it's just so simple. And it's like, no, it's simple to you now.
To you, right.
You found your way through
the
challenge.
Yes.
But the younger version of you is like, I don't have a clue.
No clue. Yeah. Please let the pain stop, right? Because you don't know, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I would also suggest that those that are still, those who recount the story, and again, we encourage that. I mean, you and I clearly are on the same page in terms of, we encourage the sharing of the story. But those that focus on the upfront portion of that story, I would suggest that perhaps there's still some healing to do to get to move forward. Because if you're stuck, you're stuck. And I got to tell you, Marsha, for me, I truly believe that whatever difficult challenges you're going through, right? Take whatever time that you need to manage it, to cope with it, to get through it. Whatever time that you need, because what you'll need to be very different than what I'll need. But don't stay there. Forward motion. And for those that are still on this, oh, and this happened to me, and this happened, and this happened to me, they haven't moved.
No, and you're touching on something that when people ask me, like, how do I know if I'm ready to share it, or how do I know if I'm not ready to share it? And I'm like, if you're stuck in a victim mindset and you are replaying all of the different scenarios, if you are angry, resentful, like comparison, sitting in that space, not the time to share a story, because it's not gonna do anything. And what happens sometimes, somebody might have the best intentions, but when you
Yes.
share from that space, I hate to say it, like what you put out, you will bring back. You will
Yes.
only attract more angry people, more people who want to be in that space, and that's not going to help you to move forward. So the first thing is, yes, and I think we're always healing. I don't think we're ever done. But I think that healing process, until you can come to a space of recognizing that, what did I learn from my story? How did that help me? I don't think you're ready to share it out with
Yes.
the public. And so not everybody is ever gonna, because I get people all the time say, well, I'm not gonna go on a podcast and share my story. Like I don't want to do that. And I'm like, you actually don't have to. But if you don't own your part of the story, like it will literally own you. It will own you. And what I mean by that is it will stop you from living the life that you are meant to live, because you are wearing that blanket of shame, and you are wearing that, and it's blocking you from things in your life. So you don't have to speak it openly, but I'll tell you something, if you don't find a way to move through it and own it, it will own you.
So let's stay on the owning piece, and let's be very clear, and perhaps I can get you to expand and get very detailed on what we're talking about. When you say own your story, what does that mean?
What it means is owning, like, what was my story? What happened? How did I respond? How did I show up? Like, all of these circumstances can happen to me, but owning my story is, how did I respond to it? What did I do with it? What was my role in it? And so as I say this, and my book that I wrote and things that I share is really coming from the space that, yes, this is what happened. This is the hand that we were dealt. My story is, how did I get back up again? How did I find my way out of a very difficult situation? How did I respond? What were my wins? What worked? What did not work?
Right.
What is like, and that's the vulnerability piece of like opening that up and letting people see you. And I know vulnerability is a really scary thing for a lot of people, but it is literally the only way to build connections and to build relationships with people, is to let people see you. Right. We're in this world of time of social media where it's like, what I see online does not mean that's who that person is.
No.
Not at all. Vulnerability is like letting somebody else see you. So owning your story is, in my opinion, is like what did I do? What worked for me? What didn't work? How did I find my way through? And letting go of those pieces of anger and resentment and frustration, because they didn't serve me in order to move forward. And ironically, it helps you when you can learn how to own it. You can heal yourself. You can see. I don't really love the whole phrase that it's like everything is happening for you. That is a terrible thing to say to somebody when they're in the middle of trauma and chaos. It really is. It's really I do believe that everything is teaching us something. I do believe that. And so when we're in that space, owning it is like, I can recognize that, like, I can't love who I am today and hate everything that made me who I am. So everything that I walk through has shaped me into be the person that I am today. And I wouldn't know those lessons and these experiences or being able to do the work that I do today without walking through the most difficult parts of my life. So it's a little bit of a distinction, but I think it's really important that, don't say it's happening for you when a person's in this. I can't even tell you how many people said that to us.
Yeah, I know. Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, really? Because like my life is a gong show. Like,
That's right. That's right.
What did I do wrong?
You're not doing honor to what's the person's experiences. You're dishonoring them, right? And you're not helpful. I'll tell you that right now. You're not helping them at all. You might be putting them even worse.
So does that help for owning what like owning your story is? And does that help to explain that for you?
Yeah, no, it absolutely does, because I think so. In my mind, I was really, when I think about owning a story, I take a really simplified approach, Marsha, when I'm thinking about this. It's, at the end of the day, am I comfortable with what happened? Right? Am I comfortable with all aspects of the story of what happened? And if I am, and I can recount that story and I don't get emotional or I don't get upset or others drum up with these other emotions, if I can tell and deliver almost in a factual A through Z, here's what took place, then I've accepted and I've owned it. That's how I viewed it in my mind. And I think, and I mean, that's my definition of it. Others might, that could be different for others, but the bottom line is it's, am I okay with it?
Yeah. And it's just, like I said, like owning it also means that I take responsibility for the things that I did that maybe weren't the best. Like I take responsibility. Like, so when you own something, ownership and blame sit on the opposite ends of the spectrum. So if you are in a space of ownership, that means that we're no longer blaming, right? Like I could blame all kinds of people for where my life was at, but it doesn't fix it and it doesn't change it. So really being in a space of not blaming everyone else for where my life was at.
Yeah. I love that. I keep smiling. You got me smiling, Marsha. You got me smiling because it is something. Well, then again, I like to smile anyway. So that's a whole other story. Let's talk about the C word and having courage. And I think it's very fitting, particularly on this podcast, because we do encourage audaciousness and boldness. And we talk about, you can have courage even in the face of the most difficult circumstances.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that the only way you see what your courage is in the face of difficult circumstances. I don't need a lot of courage when everything's going smooth and easy.
Life's good.
I actually really don't. So it's like, people say, well, that's easy. I do hear this a lot. I do. That's easy for you because you're strong. You have courage. And I'm like, no, I wasn't born with it. It's not I actually think it's a muscle. And I think you only can strengthen that muscle by doing. So if you are a person, and maybe this will resonate because this is who I was for a long time. If you are waiting for things to be perfect before you show up, that's not your authentic self, and it's not relatable, and that's not building courage. And you're actually never going to build courage because you're never going to start, because it's not ever going to be perfect. So to me, it's about that. Where can you embrace messy action, show up, step into that space? Courage is something that you build by doing. It's an action. You can, I can read all the books. You see, I have books. I can read all the books. I can think my way to being courageous. Never going to happen. No. It's like an action and you have to do it. And I actually think the more you start to do it, the more you start to embrace your voice, your message, what that is, and owning it. And that's where it can become even more audacious. I know sometimes people think that I'm a little bit much when it comes to this, and then it's too much. They're not my people. That's fine. Right. But it's the audaciousness is something that we all have in us, and we find our own voice, but you're never going to find that. And you're never going to find courage unless you allow yourself to be seen. So vulnerability is allowing you to see me and for me to share the hard parts. Through vulnerability is how we get, I need courage to be able to do that. To get there. And
it's a vehicle.
It's a vehicle. And so it's something that you build.
Mm-hmm. The idea of staying small and staying safe. I heard someone say the other day recently that, everyone's trying to stay small and get to death safely, right? And the whole idea is okay, wow, you got to get out of this shell. You got to get bigger, and you got to be bolder, and you got to take risks, and you got to take chances. I think the idea is, and I've oftentimes said that if you're truly being your authentic self, you're not taking a chance. You're being exactly who you're supposed to be. This is who I'm supposed to be. So you're not taking a risk. And I think if we can sort of think about that, really think that through, this is what life is, right? Taking that, being us.
And I actually wonder if so many people don't even know who they are to be able to, I think and again, back to courage and doing, I think you're going to learn by doing, but I think I love the way that you said that. And I think it comes down to allowing yourself to be your true authentic self. But I don't think a lot of people are clear on even who that is.
Yeah. Or even that process, or even how to do it. I think that's the other part about that. I think for me, in my mind, the way I frame it is you do it by doing it. That's as simple as that. You do it by doing it. You get the reps in. You take the chances. You catch the L's, but you learn from them, right? And you take that and so that's what we talk about the value of experiences. I think that if you go through an experience and you leave the lesson behind, you've just wasted that experience.
Oh, I could not agree more.
Right?
And that's where I talk about like the lesson is like, once you've learned that, I actually really believe this may be a little bit woo for some people, but when you've learned that lesson, it's actually not for you anymore. Like your job is to pay it forward because you've learned how to do that. But that younger version of you who is looking for that support and answers, they're praying for what you're holding on to. So it's like why I often equate it to if I walk through a door and I figure out a way to get through the door, I can hold it for the person behind me or I can just let it slam. I choose to share. So
I
that's
love
just
that one.
that just helps me. And listen, and it might sound like very philanthropic, but here's the bigger picture that allowed me to start this is that in the beginning, if I made it only about me, I was too afraid to show up. I was too afraid to show up because I was too afraid of what were people going to think or say. If I made it about it could help somebody else, it became impossible not to show up and do it.
Framing it, is it about me or is it about others?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And when we make that distinction, then it's very much clear in your mind. You touched on, you mentioned the word vulnerability a couple times, and very, very powerful from a connection standpoint, from even building our own internal fortitude, to being genuine and authentic with others. I wonder if you spend some time talking about the significance of just vulnerability and why, we benefit from being able to expose our wares.
I mean, pardon me, I could do a whole show just on vulnerability. I think it's incredibly powerful. It is the path to building connection. Years ago, when I was trying to figure out, like, again, shame, running the wheel, not sure where to go, what to do. A counselor recommended going into a Facebook group. So I went into a couple of Facebook groups to connect. The first time I went into one was a substance abuse group for parents, for moms, and there was 100,000 moms. And the second I went in, I was like, okay, whoa, it's not just me. Like that was I needed that to go, like, because I thought it was just me. Yes. Right. And I know that sounds really naive, but I did. And in that space, I started to connect with other moms. And you'll find different energies when you're around people. Some were very angry, some were very resentful, very bitter, and some were like, how do I find hope? So you start to find your people. And during that space, I found like one person who messaged something, and well, she did on her own personal Facebook page. But when I saw it, I was like, wait, I think I know what she's struggling with. And I private messaged her and I'm like, can I just ask, is this what you're referring to? And she's like, oh my God, did somebody tell you? And I'm like, no, I'm living what you're talking about. And I'm in those spaces. And so we ended up connecting. She's to this day one of my closest friends. Beautiful. And the people that I have connected with the most that are in my life now are because of vulnerability. And the reason that I share that is because I actually think if most of us can think about our deepest connections with our friends, our family, whoever that is, but your deepest relationships that you have, the true deep ones, they probably came from a point in your life where you allowed that person to see a part of you. Allow a part of you to be seen. They were able to support you at a difficult time, or vice versa. You have this deep inherent connection that you wouldn't have if you hadn't had to allow vulnerability to be there. So I know it's scary. People say all the time, it's so scary. And I'm like, no, that's part of it is a story you're telling yourself that it's scary. And I get it. But every time I think of sharing a part of myself and I get a little bit afraid, I think, all right, well, who is in my life now because of vulnerability? And that's like 95% of the people that are here now. And before I started to really share my story and own it and be in a space, we had to walk away from a lot of people because it was just, and you know what? It's not a hard feeling. It's just, we were not the right people. They were not the people to help me in this space. So allowing yourself to be vulnerable allows the people to see you that can be that source of support, that light, all of these things. So it's incredibly powerful. But let me just say one thing, vulnerability without boundaries, right? This is a Brene Brown quote. It's not mine. Vulnerability without boundaries is manipulative. And we can all see this happen online, where we've also gone to the extreme where people are so sharing everything.
Yes.
There's zero boundaries. Some of it is a bit of look at me and how bad it is.
Yes.
And look at how bad everyone else is in my story. That's not vulnerability. Vulnerability is 100% about you.
Yes.
And you sharing you, like allowing yourself to be seen, not everyone else in your story. And so that's a very big distinction with vulnerability.
Yep. It's interesting. I mean, when you talk about people who are uncomfortable with being vulnerable, they're going to say, "Hey, Marsha, I can't do that. Like, I'm sorry, I can't. And maybe it's fear, or whatever. They're going to say, I just can't. And to me, I interpret that as just they're just not ready to, as opposed to they can't, because we all can. And I would even argue at some point in time we all are being vulnerable, but maybe not with either with certain parts of stories or certain groups of individuals, or because maybe we're vulnerable with our friends and family, but not our coworkers at work, right? So
and it's the wrong people. Sometimes it's the wrong people. You're going to be. I was vulnerable in the beginning with some people who did nothing but glorify my story, and all of a sudden gossip was everywhere, and I was like, "Wait, why'd you do that? Like, I didn't understand why you did that." And it's like that I had to learn. I thought that meant being vulnerable was wrong. It's just I was being vulnerable with the wrong people. And you're going to make mistakes.
Yes.
You are, until you're clear on who you choose to surround yourself with. So you're going to make mistakes. They're going to happen. But again, just like audacious living, you're not going to figure that out until you actually try. You're going to get it wrong. It's okay.
Right. Yeah,
but you learn, and then it's like, ooh, next time. Like, there are parts of my, like, when I share things on podcasts and I share in my books, like, some people will say, "Oh my God, like, that's a lot of detail." But the people who know me are like, "Yeah, you're not even saying anything. Like, I don't give out the details." So it's a perception. It's
like, you ain't seen nothing yet, right?
No, not at all. Not at all.
I certainly want to go back to a point that you made, because I really do think it's a significant one with respect to when you said you joined the Facebook group and you found other individuals, right? It's very easy to, when you're going through an experience, to think you're the only person in the planet that knows anything about this specific thing, and no one else could possibly have any idea or know what it feels like, or even knows how to get through it. But when you step into a space where you look around the room and everyone's saying the same thing, that's really powerful.
You know what, you're exactly right. And I encourage people that it doesn't have to be my story, but whatever your story is, there's groups for it. Like, find a way to get into a group, because if anything, it helps you to recognize you're not alone. I think that's the biggest reason why we feel so much shame and why we keep ourselves so isolated, because we think we're the only person in the world struggling with it. I guarantee you are never the only person in the world. It feels like it. But the reason it feels like it is because we keep ourselves so safe and protected. And small.
That's right. Small. We're not living audaciously.
But no, and here's the thing, it's like, and you don't know, right? Like, when you're living small, what has to happen is that the pain of staying here has to be greater than the unknown of going for here. Yes. And that's what it came to, is that I don't know what this is going to look like over here, but this life, I don't want to live this anymore. It's incredibly uncomfortable. It's isolating. I don't want to be here. That's how you start to do it. Like, the pain of staying the same has to be greater than they're moving forward.
And we talked earlier about the importance of kind of moving through things, right? So you stop. It's only gonna, if it's hot now, stopping is only going to make it hotter. It's like, so you keep moving, right? You keep moving, and not that it won't be hot that next step, but it still will be less hot than if you stayed.
Yeah, and you stack your wins, right? It takes time. It takes time. I think it's not. How I sound today is not how I sounded 5 years ago.
Right.
It's not. And when I first started, it was literally every day checking in and going, what do I need right now? How do I shift myself? How do I change my energy? How do I build myself up? Because I was a puddle of mess. Like, I was actually an absolute puddle of mess. And when
do you recognize that person? You recognize?
I don't actually. I really don't. But I also don't judge her. I'm grateful because if she hadn't fought hard, I wouldn't be here. Right. We spend a lot of time judging our younger self, and I think we actually have to find a way to be grateful, because we wouldn't be here if they didn't exciting. So
you'll hear people say things like, "Oh, I was so stupid when I was a kid," or "I was so dumb," and right, this minimizing language, right? Not recognizing that, you can stand here now and judge all you want, but you're able to stand here because you got wisdom, knowledge, and experience that you didn't have back then.
Yes, yes. And that you will never gain that wisdom, knowledge, and experience unless you start moving. You won't. It doesn't, again, there's no book that you can take it in and do it. The thing is we learn by living through it, right? I could have read all of my experience in a book, would have never, I wish I could have rather than living it, but I couldn't. That's not how it works. We actually have to get into motion and apply those lessons into our life. That's how we learn.
Right. I think we talked about the sharing of the story and vulnerability, and I think an appropriate topic would be the process of healing, right? And you've gone through this traumatic thing, you experienced it, you didn't like it, you learned from it, you owned it, you picked up the lessons, you're teaching other people, but that healing process, I wonder if you can talk about what that looks like for people. And I recognize it'll be different. It's not just the same for everyone too. So I want to acknowledge that, but there's still a process, isn't there?
There is. And I'm glad that you asked me that, because I've been like that fighter, pusher, doer my whole life. Like I can get anything done. And so when I found myself in a space of moving through this, I was like, just keep moving, keep pushing, keep doing it. And then all of a sudden I hit a point where it was like, why is my body, like I was just breaking down everywhere. Everything it was just struggling. And it was through some support that I was like, wait, I've never taken the time to heal. Like I have not taken the time to slow down and heal. We carry our body, we carry trauma in our body more than we realize. Right. And when you come from, I came from the generation where it was like, you suck it up, you shove it under the rug and you keep moving, right?
Yep,
Sweet.
Yep.
Don't feel it. There's no time
to feel it. Suck it up, buttercup, go.
Yep, suck it up, buttercup, and numb it if you have to, but you keep moving. And I finally recognized that it's like, wait, I turned 50, my body started, I just was like, this is not working. Like, what's the matter? And it's like, I have never taken the time to heal and allow myself just to be. So that's what led me down to taking my NLP and neurolinguistic programming. Now, I actually thought NLP was just for sales. That I didn't know. I didn't know. And it wasn't. And it was really understanding like the power of my thoughts and how I was holding a lot of trauma in my body and what I was doing and how I had to. So you can't just think of changing the story, which is what I used to teach for a long time. Yep. Because people carry trauma in their body. You can't just think your way to make a change. When you think your way, you're using like 5% of your brain, 95% of your subconscious mind. You have to really go back and do the work there. So there's a lot of different modalities that you can use to heal. And I've used a lot of different ones, from hypnosis to EFT tapping to subliminals to time techniques, again, counseling, therapy. I'm very much more of the action based. That's just, I like to integrate and apply it in. And so those tools have really helped me to actually go back and like subconsciously change the meaning of the stories, change the experience. I didn't know I needed that until I like I said, my body hit a wall, and I was in an appointment and something dropped in the room and I jumped, and the counselor was like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, that was scary. She goes, no one else jumped. And I'm like, oh, I was noisy. And she's like, that is PTSD trapped in your body. And I was like, no. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, you know what? It is. And we trap those emotions in our body for so long until eventually it's kind of like the genie in the bottle. It eventually, the pressure will boil, and what you eventually blow up at has nothing to do with the original events. It's just, you've carried it for so long. Yep. So I've really spent the last year and a half like breaking down of like, how can I best support myself? So I was very much the person who pushed hard in workouts and did all those things. And now it's like, I check in every day. It's like, what do I need? What do I need? How do I take care of me? How do I work at a pace that supports me and allows me to go long, like longevity wise? Yep. Boundaries, how to say yes and no to things. And Really learning, I think one of the biggest things I have learned is the difference between reacting and responding. So being the fighter for most of my life, I reacted to everything. Like I would constantly, until you start to recognize that that's a lot of energy that you're wasting too, because I don't have to fight every single battle that comes my way.
No.
But I did, I was good at
Mm.
it. And then it was like, wait, I have no energy left for anything else. And it's like, well, you've spent all day fighting things that you don't need to fight. They're not yours. So then I started to learn how to respond, and responding is a really powerful difference in learning on how much energy am I going to give to this situation. The more I know personally, I had a situation at Christmas and something came up and they were like, ooh, let's see how Marsha handles this. And I was like, it's not my problem. And they were like, well, what happened? Like, what happened to you? Because that's not a reaction we're used to with you. And I just went, it's not my problem and I don't need to fight it. And I had that moment, I was like, oh, I'm different.
Yeah.
I'm different.
Yeah.
So when we're healing, we recognize we become different people. We react differently. We respond differently. And we need to honor those moments and go, okay, I'm making headway. Like this is actually, so healing is a process.
Yes.
It really is a process, and it is different for everyone, but I strongly say, like, be curious about all the different things that are available and, just keep experimenting. So it's not as simple as just counseling. There might be a lot of different things in it, but get very curious.
And when we talk about healing, you don't just, I'm healed. It as you said, it is a process, right? And I love the comment about honoring that, because sometimes, we have made progress.
Mhm.
We've not recognized it's not necessarily visible to us, but we've moved. We weren't, the needle is, even if it's even a fraction, right?
Yep.
The needle has moved. The dial is slightly shifted from where you started to where you are. And you honor that and you give yourself credit, because then when you give yourself credit for things, you just naturally feel better about the progress that you're making.
That is 100% true. And humans, we don't celebrate ourselves enough, and we don't give ourselves enough credit.
Right.
And we are our biggest critics. So really, if you think about those things, it's like, if we're never setting ourselves up for success, like you can't, again, I think if I really buy into those three things that I said, like never giving yourself enough credit, always being like hard on yourself, being your biggest critic, that will keep you small. They will keep you small. It's just it's inherent. So really celebrate your wins and like celebrate your growth, because honestly, we're not supposed to be the same people.
Right.
And I wasn't the same person I was last week. So we're not supposed to be the same people. So we need to really honor how much growth we are all experiencing. I think it's really important.
So one of the I have this what I call the bold framework, and I encourage individuals, if you want to live your best audacious self, you adopt the principles of this bold framework, and it's an acronym BOLD. The B in that bold framework is better than yesterday. So it's encouraging constant growth, it's encouraging constant improvement. It's recognizing that I had amazing accomplishments yesterday, but that was yesterday. What's today and what tomorrow? So it's always trying to be better than you were yesterday. And so as you talk about, that's the first thing that comes to mind. The O in the framework is outlast adversity. The L is live your truth, which is tied into authenticity. And the D is disrupt the norm, which is just be a trailblazer, because you're going to need to. So, but better than yesterday is an important one, I think. So thank you for touching on that.
Oh my God, I love that. Actually, I think I did touch on each of those. And I love the acronym, and I think it's really, really powerful. Better than you were yesterday. Can I just share a really good book if people it's so simple. It's called The Gap in the Gain. It's Dan Sullivan. It's really short. But better than you were yesterday. The reason why that book is good, and that book changed me last year when I read it.
Okay.
Because when you stand in the game, you are always comparing yourself to yourself. You're comparing yourself to your younger self.
Yes.
The gap is when you're comparing yourself to where you're not yet, to who has doing it better than you, all those things. Social media is the gap. So social media is only the gap. It's only the gap. It's showing you where you're not.
That's right.
So continually come back to, am I doing this better than yesterday? Am I showing up better than yesterday? Am I becoming a better human than yesterday? I think is like, compare yourself to yourself, and that's it. No one else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love it.
And I
You have
had
me
to,
smiling.
I had to be, that book has, every time I get hard on myself or critical of myself, I literally will say, I'm like, Marsha, you're standing in the gap. You're doing the gap again. It's like, oh crap, I am. It's like, it's focus on the gain. So really like I really think that to give yourself a fighting chance
Yep.
in life and through your challenges is like, honestly, be your biggest cheerleader and like compare yourself to yourself. Yeah.
Amazing. You share the book, The Gap in the Gain, but as an author, I think it's important that we give you an opportunity to talk about your book, and it's why she stopped. Sorry, why she stopped asking why.
Yeah, when she stopped asking why.
When? That's
all good. It's all good. When I first brought that title to my publisher who was helping me, she's like, it's too long. And I'm like, nope, we're doing it. Like, that's the title that I want. And the reason is because that was the turning point for me. When I stopped asking why is when my life changed. So when you asked me in the beginning about owning your story, when you can get to a space of stop asking why is a victim question when you are looking for a reason why you're going through something. Why only works when you're moving towards something. It doesn't work when you're replaying something.
Right.
And so even to this day, when I get myself stuck in a space of like, but why is this happening? It's like, no, what can you do next? Like what is all that matters? Because what is also an action word. And so when I found myself in a space of feeling like I wanted to write my book, I remember being so excited and so proud. It was 2016. And I started to tell family and be very careful who you share your dreams and ideas with, because nobody thought it was a good idea. And I think it's because everybody was so afraid of what I was going to say. And so I'm so grateful that I was like, no, I think I'm actually supposed to do this. And I spent that year very much alone and isolated and working on writing. And during that time, like when the book came out, was very vulnerable. It's a very vulnerable book about me. And what do you do when your life plan does not go according to plan, which is literally always. And so I wrote it in the sense that I wanted it to be the intention was that it would support somebody who never even walked in my shoes. You don't have to be a parent who dealt with teen substance abuse. I've gotten letters from people who they lost their spouse, they lost a parent, and this helped them to be able to reframe and build their life up. Yeah. So it's a very heartfelt vulnerable share. It's also very digestible. And only could probably read it in a few hours. And so that's when she stopped asking why.
Never I think minimize, but the importance of sharing. And so but at the same time, it's that courage thing we talked about, right? There's some courage, and for those who take that step forward to share, I think that should be celebrated. So I celebrate you and say congratulations on doing that and sharing in the world, sharing in the manner that you have. I'd be remiss if I didn't give you an opportunity to talk about your podcaster from a fellow podcaster.
Yeah, exactly. My podcast is Own Your Choices, Own Your Life. And those are the words that probably saved my life years ago. And I didn't know at the time. I was like, I like those words. I use them every day. I might as well use them for the podcast. And it is built. Yeah, it is definitely what I wanted to do. Was I wanted to start a podcast to be able to share vulnerable stories, to show people how do you work your way through a very difficult story.
Yes. And
we're into episode, I think we released 521 today. And I know it's a journey. Episode 521 today. And with that, a number of interviews. I have a second podcast called Everybody Holds a Story, because we do everything about body stories. I know it's crazy. But it's really powerful, and I love connecting. And it's a reminder for me, because almost everybody we get to interview, or I interview solo, they almost always attribute like what they're doing today to what they walk through. And so it's really brought me in connection with people who are willing to share vulnerable stories in hopes of being that guidance for somebody else who is working through a difficult time. So we don't always talk about the pretty things, but we certainly do give the details, and we help people with how to move through their stories. It's just inspiration and hope, right?
Yeah. No, I hear you. Again, I talked to her about the significance of telling that story about how you move through and how you get past it. Those I can listen to that all day long. So and those are, to me, those are the best parts of the story. So
yeah, they are.
Yeah. Marsha, this is so awesome. I've had such a delightful chat with you and a great time. And I really feel that we touched on some real powerful stuff. And if one person walks away and goes, holy smokes, that was pretty, then we've done what we were supposed to do. So thank you for being a part of this process with me. For our listeners who want to learn more about you or catch up with you or check out your podcast or your books, where can we send them?
The easiest thing that I've done for you is because I have a very long last name is everything is Marsha Van W. Like everything across all platforms is Marsha and then VANW across all platforms. And then my podcast is Own Your Choices, Own Your Life. I'm pretty active on almost all social media and on the podcast episodes, we have 3 going out a week. So
that's amazing. Congrats, man. I know your pain, man. That's awesome. I love it. I love it.
It's a different pain, but I mean, I love it. And I have had this belief all along. I've had a lot of mentors say to me that you should not be podcasting that much. You should not be doing that much. And I'm like,
really?
I think because it's, you know what, we spend money, right? We're doing things to do. It's not necessarily a business when you start. Some people will start it saying, I want to sponsors and get paid right from the beginning. It's like, no, you got to be able to put value out. You've got to put the value out. It's a long game.
That's it. It is. It's a long tail, right?
It is.
Yeah. So no, I hear you. I'm with you. And again, love the work. I'm going to tap in and be a follower, add that to my podcast list. Thank you again. I appreciate you for hanging out with me here on the Audacious Living podcast. Marsha, all the best, and we'll catch up soon.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for having me, Audley.
Back we are on the podcast, and I first off want to send my thanks and appreciation to Marsha for being here and discussing the immense impacts that we can have on others by sharing our stories. I thought she did a really good job and made some fantastic points around why it's so important that we must own our stories before we share them, and then how to know when we're ready to do so. Again, Marsha, my thanks goes out to you, and congratulations on your work, and keep up the fantastic job of impacting others. You know, when I think back to the conversation we just had, I really appreciated so much of what Marsha had to say, but if there's just one thing I take from our chat, it would have to be this. Sharing personal stories with others can have many positive benefits for both ourselves and for those around us. When we share our stories, they can be beneficial in so many ways. For example, when we open up about our experiences, we allow others to see a different side of us, and we create opportunities for empathy and understanding, which can help us build stronger relationships with others. Sharing our personal stories can also encourage vulnerability, which is an important aspect of personal growth. When we share our struggles and our challenges with others, we show that it's okay to be imperfect and that we all face struggles at some point or another in our lives. Our personal stories can also provide much needed perspective, both for ourselves and the others that are around us, and they can provide a much deeper understanding of who we are and our place in the world. Of course, the inspiration is huge. When we share our successes and triumphs, they can have a profound impact when we show others what's possible and motivate them to pursue their own goals and dreams. Finally, sharing personal stories can be a powerful tool for healing. When we share our experiences with others, we can release the emotions that we've been holding on to and find much needed closure. When we're listening, it also works too, because when we hear those stories, we can offer support and validation to others, which also can be incredibly healing. Look, there's a whole host of reasons why validation and that we validate why sharing our stories is a good thing. They have the ability to help us grow, connect, and thrive. So don't be afraid to open up and share your audacious experiences with others. You never know who you might inspire or how they might be impacted by your story. We've come to the end of another edition of the most audacious podcast the internet has to offer, the Audacious Living Podcast. And I thank you for being here. As always, our lovers of audaciousness, I appreciate your ongoing support. It's much, much appreciated. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.